This program is a presentation of UCTV for educational and non-commercial use only.
I would like to introduce and welcome Professor Thomas Scheff from University of California at Santa Barbara. He is an honorary doctor at our university. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you.
Tom is passing Costa because he's going to Copenhagen and he will be celebrated as an honorary doctor at the Copenhagen University. Yeah. But you can tell them that we were first.
Yeah.
Yes. And also I wish to welcome Björn and Johan. They are going to be Tom's sidekicks when Tom needs some entertainment and we need some entertainment. We call Johan and Björn. How many of you have seen Smala Sussie? You probably recognize Pölsa there and Micke 13. They are terrible twins. They always go together, so you can't see them alone. You see them always together. Welcome, Johan and Björn.
It's good. Now you are prepared, and now you are prepared to give the big star here tonight. Give a big hand from Santa Barbara, USA, Tom Scheff.
I thought I'd try to be funny, but I can't beat that. Actually, I want to try an experiment. I like to get a laugh. And I'm speaking to an English-speaking audience with a joke, but my Swedish is a little too rustic for telling us a joke in Swedish. So I want you to think of a word in Swedish that is humorous to you, a single word, and tell your neighbor what that word is. Could you try that for a second? A single word that is humorous to you. Huh? Okay? The cameraman in the back, tell us your word. And Christian, what is your word? Mutti. Anyone else want to volunteer? Okay, laughter is very important, as is crying. Have you ever been in a group in which everyone was crying? Raise your hands if you've been in a group in which everyone was crying. Yeah. Laughing and crying are very elemental parts of the human condition, very important. And modern societies tend to poo-poo laughing and crying. But they are signals of emotion, external signals of emotion. So if someone is laughing or crying, you can tell they're going through an emotional event. And what emotional event? What was the name of the emotion in Swedish that laughing signifies? What? Anyone want to take a guess? What is the primary emotion in laughter? It's a hard question because there are different kinds of laughter. So let's say a happy laugh, where you're sort of laughing at yourself. Ha ha, silly me. What is the name of that emotion?
Relief, maybe.
Okay, it is definitely a release, but it has a very specific name. The emotion in which is cathartic. Laughter is the cathartic signal that we are getting relief from that emotion. Anyone else want to guess? Joy. Joy. That's a good guess, but in my opinion, that could be part of it. But it's not the main emotion. Ordinarily we think of it as a painful emotion. Joy is not painful, but it's often part of happy laughter. What's the emotion? Yes? Shame. Yeah, well, shame is the generic name, but often there's a lesser version of shame that we think of connected with laughter.
Sorrow.
What?
Sorrow.
Sorrow, that's another emotion, that's grief. Very important, and then crying is a signal for that, a release of grief. It's embarrassment. When we make a mistake in public, one reaction we can have is to laugh at ourselves, and that relieves the embarrassment. And that's why I like to get a laugh, thanks to Bjorn and Yuan, to get lots of laughs, because it diminishes the level of collective embarrassment connected with learning and professors. You understand? So we've gotten very primitive here all of a sudden to say that there is an elemental, universal emotion connected with happy laughter, with joyful laughter, with cathartic laughter, and it's embarrassment, which is part of the shame family. Any questions or comments about that? Feel free. I won't embarrass you. There is no wrong question in this class, okay? I have a mathematics professor friend back in Santa Barbara who has developed a technique for teaching math to children where there's no wrong answers. He can figure out a question for which the student's answer is correct. And so there's no wrong answers. And of course, that's about shame and embarrassment. Higher education especially is a veil of shame and embarrassment. There's a right answer and there's lots of wrong answers. And everyone is embarrassed about that. So if some of you could figure out a way of removing just a little bit of the shame and embarrassment from education, you would do humankind a service. No one has figured it out yet. Except we know we like to get laughs. My topic today actually is about what is the place of emotion in the midst of thought, of cognition, of rationality. What place does emotion hold? And I'm going to talk a few minutes about that and then ask for your response. I've found out that giving long talks is not a good idea, especially to once-only audiences, so I try to get the audience involved in making comments, protests, objections, examples from your own life. Those are especially important. And what I'm going to talk about today is the important role that emotions play in the universe of thought. This issue came up for me several years ago because I am involved as a veteran of the Korean War. I am involved in Veterans for Peace activism in Santa Barbara, where I live in California. Every Sunday we put up a memorial to the Iraq War veterans who have been killed, the soldiers, U.S. soldiers, who've been killed in Iraq. The number is now up almost to 5,000. Every Sunday we put up 3,000 crosses and we make a little military cemetery by the pier where the tourists come to go to the tourist attractions on the pier. And they come along and they look and they're surprised. There are 3,000 crosses. What is a cemetery doing with American flags by this tourist pier, by an entertainment? Well, we do edutainment, the veterans, because when they look puzzled, we go up to them and hand them a postcard, a memorial postcard, and ask, and then they ask us questions. They say, well, is this about the war? Yes. Which war, they say. Which war? The Iraq War. And then they say, and then they look again, and they say, what for? And then the answer we give is very important here, if we want to get down to the emotions. You have to say, to honor our dead. That works. And then they look again, and then if it's a woman, they cry. And if it's a man, they reach in their pocket and they get out big money, a donation. They've been moved emotionally by the sight of these 3,000 crosses. And then they all say the same thing. They say, before I saw this, it was just a number to me. It was just a number. Well, I've been thinking about that answer for a long time. And what that means to me is that I carry around a lot of numbers in my head, all more or less of equal importance. And not just numbers, words, images, memories, thoughts. It's a galaxy, it's a universe of cognitions. How do I discriminate in importance between the different cognitions? Well, these tourists told me how they do it. Emotion, in this case grief, is a marker of what's important in that intergalactic universe, that numberless infinity of words and thoughts and images, the ones that are marked with emotion. Now, I want you to think about your universe of addresses, names, jokes, memories, dialogues. Our head is full of dialogues. If you try to meditate, like I try, I find that there's a talker in my head talking about dialogues that have happened, that are going to happen, and to-do lists. There's all kind of talking going on in my head, and I'm trying to stop it, so I have to stop and think about the moment. So how do you discriminate what is an important memory to you, and see if there's a feeling connected with it, like I'm saying? Take a moment, think about that. Close your eyes. Meditate on your important memories, thoughts, words, and numbers.
We're going to take you on a little trip because we're going to work with the brains here, I think, a time. And it's a mental journey. It's a mental journey to the jungle, and it's very special. And we're going right now. Are you with? Are you with? Yes. How with are you? Yes.
That's where you say very with.
We try that again. Here comes 1 and 2 and we, everybody. Oh yeah 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 yeah. Wee. And the lyrics is we a wimba wamba way. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4. Are we having fun or have we fun? We have fun. So it's we're gonna use the brains now a little bit more, and without just know the lyrics and think of the lyrics, because now we have landed in the jungle, and it's night, and in the night we have to fall asleep, but it's dark in the jungle tonight. Oh yes, it is, and it's a very, 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 very scary darkness that is falling about us. And it's the time in the jungle when all the animals that are living in the jungle making more animals of themselves, if you say. So you better be careful so you don't fall asleep in a way and lies in a way that you don't want to lie like, if you look like something you shouldn't look like if it comes, yes. That is good. So these animals, the dangerous animals, are making sounds when they do this thing when they're going on. So we're gonna learn you some of these dangerous animals' sounds, how they sound like when it's dangerous. Okay? And I have Jan Lindblad, Johan Andersson, to make the sounds for you, authentically. Be my guest, Johan.
Okay, the first animal in the jungle that you should be aware of is Håkan, the dangerous jungle monkey. And the second animal in the jungle that you should be aware of is Majsan, the dangerous jungle cow. And the last and most dangerous of them all is Boris, the little green sticky frog.
You see, it's difficult to talk about feelings in modern societies because modern societies emphasize the material world, behavior, outward behavior that is visible like the material world, and then in the inner world, just the thoughts. It's easy to talk about our thoughts. But modern societies and modern languages, most of them, have a very poor vocabulary for talking about feelings. I'll tell you one of my memories from childhood. My mother had very little schooling. Came from a poor family, and she was yanked out of school in the elementary school, 6th grade. But she became a reader anyway. She loved reading. And somehow she read Goethe's Faust, not just the first volume, but also the second, about Fausts' Redemption. And the part of that story that she told me over and over again was from the second volume, when Faust has escaped from the devil because he made a provision in the pact with the devil. Do you know the story, Faust? He made a provision that the devil would get his soul if he could show him such pleasure that he wanted time to stand still. Well, naturally, Faust got surfeited very quickly with all the pleasures, and he never wanted time to stand still with pleasure. But now he's gotten away from the devil, and he's walking around Europe wondering what he's going to do with the rest of his life. His soul is his own. And as he's walking in Holland, beside the Zuider Zee, he hears a commotion, yelling and screaming. And he sees that the dike has broken and the water is rushing in. and they're trying to save their lands from the sea. And so he joins them, and he helps them. And they mend the dike, and the land is saved. And they go to a tavern, and they're drinking healths and having food, and people are patting Faust on the back and thanking him for helping them. And Faust realizes this is the moment he has been looking for time to stand still. And that story reminds me of my mother, who's long gone, and it's covered with feeling. Anyone else? She told me that story over and over again so that I wouldn't forget. I'm hoping Yuan is going to come in with his song and dance so that I don't have to do it.
Alltså jag är egentligen bara på väg hem, va. Men så såg jag att det lyste och stojades och stimmades lite grann. Och då tänkte jag att då går jag in. Man är ju lite grann av ett party animal. Och jag kan säga så här direkt och dessutom inledningsvis att jag är rätt spontan i min läggning. Jag kan till exempel säga saker som jag inte kommer ihåg sen. Och då slipper jag ju ta ansvar för dem. Jag är en sån här författare numera och predikar egentligen ordets underbara förälskelse i mig själv. Nu vet jag till exempel inte riktigt vad jag menar, men ut kom det och jag minns inte. Jag är ute på en sån här promotion-turné nu för mina 3 senaste böcker som jag har här. Så jag tänkte passa på att göra lite reklam för. Så det här är en julbok och den heter Allt du inte visste om glögg. Där berättar jag allt om julen och allt man ska tänka på, hur man gör sina egna julgranskulor och allting sånt. Och bland annat har jag gjort lite egenstudier i mitt källarlaboratorium som jag har hemma i källaren. Bland annat så har jag kommit på att man blir väldigt mycket mer berusad på varm glögg än på kall glögg. Jag provade det nämligen. Först så drack jag en halv liter kall och sen drack jag en halv liter varm. Och då sa det tjong i min medaljong, kan jag säga. Hej med mig! Ja, jag har fått det här berättat för mig. Jag tycker man är lite konstigt om man är lite fysiskt bevandrad, för molekylerna rör sig väldigt mycket fortare i en varm blandning än en kall. Då tänker man att det som gör att man borde hinna upp till huvudet fortare i en varm än i en kall. Men så blir det inte. De här böckerna kommer att finnas till salu på Gengåvan. Men jag har fått en beställning på den här glöggboken här och det är Susanne som har korvkiosken i Skoghall. Hon har beställt en sån här och hon sa att det är väldigt bra papper att lägga korv i. Då sa jag, men snälla Susanne, sa jag. Vi säger så.
Okay, this is the easy part of the program so far. Now comes the hard part. Suppose in modern societies we're able to laugh for some of the embarrassment that we suffer, but not for all. And the more we're embarrassed or feel rejected or excluded or inferior or awkward, et cetera, the more we get behind on our laughing. We have special occasions in which we're allowed and encouraged to laugh, but there are not enough of them. So little by little, as we grow older, we get further and further behind on the cathartic laughter. What kind of laughter is not cathartic? There's an angry laugh where you're laughing at someone, ridiculing someone. That's usually not cathartic. Cathartic laughter of the kind we've been hearing today, I'm sure it's cathartic and it's a help, but we get behind on our embarrassment supply of getting relief from the embarrassment, and people get more and more embarrassable and embarrassed the older they get, for most people, not all. Now, what about grief? Suppose that just as laughter is the catharsis for embarrassment, shame, humiliation, suppose that crying with sobbing and tears, happy cry, a good cry, you say, I had a good cry. How many of you know what I mean by a good cry? Raise your hands. Okay, what about a bad cry? You cry and you just feel worse. Okay, so now I'm talking about a good cry. A good cry. Modern societies are not real friendly towards good cries, especially in men. But even women have difficulty these days. If say a woman, you're in the workplace and you are sad and cry, your co-workers are apt to be upset about that, right? So it's hard to have a good cry in modern society. Here's a song about it by Iris DeMent. Yeah, any of you know her name, Iris DeMent? Well, who's the partner she sings with? Prine. Oh, John Prine. John Prine, yeah, a wonderful singer. It's called No Time to Cry. My father died a year ago. The rooster started crowing when they carried Dad away. There beside my mother in the living room I stood with my brothers and my sisters, knowing Dad was gone for good. Well, I stayed home just long enough to lay him in the ground, and then I caught a plane to do a show up north in Detroit town. Because I'm older now, and I've got no time to cry. I've got no time to look back. I've got no time to see the pieces of my heart that have been ripped away from me. And if the feeling starts to coming, I've learned to stop them fast, because I don't know if I let them go, they may not want to pass. And there's bills to pay and songs to play and a house to make a home. I guess I'm older now, and I've got no time to cry. When I was 40 years old, I learned to cry when I needed to cry, but it was a great embarrassment to my children. They pretend they didn't know me if I cried in public. I hope that doesn't mean that they have no time to cry. Now, fear is another emotion that's completely separate. And in order to keep order in this discussion, I'm going to define fear fairly narrowly as the threat, our reaction to the threat of physical danger. You're driving on the freeway, and you see that someone is coming toward you in your lane, and the wrong way driver. And you don't have to think about it. You have a fear reaction. Faster than light. It's instinctive. Wake up, sleepyhead. If you don't do something, you're going to get killed. And it takes a hundredth of a second for all that to communicate. And you turn your car over if necessary to avoid head-on collision. That's fear. And I restrict it to physical danger because in modern societies we like to mix up fear with other emotions that are less mentionable. What does it mean if you say, I fear rejection? There's no physical danger. What emotion are you talking about in a sort of underhanded way?
Shame.
What?
Shame.
Yeah. Instead of saying, I anticipate being shamed, you say, I fear rejection. And I tell my students that, and their eyes glaze over. I find myself saying, I fear rejection. But it's a trick to avoid the S word, which in modern societies is not speakable. Okay, now here's a hard question that no one knows the real answer to, but I'll have my opinion, which I'll tell you after you guess. What is the catharsis of fear? We've talked about happy cry, a good cry for grief, and a good laugh at yourself, basically, for embarrassment, shame, humiliation. What is a sign of the discharge of fear, the catharsis for fear, so that you don't get a backlog of fear, so that you're frightened all the time? Okay, it's a hard question. Just guess. It's okay. No shame if you don't get my opinion, because it's just an opinion. What could be the bodily reaction to the discharge of fear? What does your body do? Yes.
Pain.
What?
Pain.
Okay, but that's a very general idea. This is very specific. You had an idea.
Survival.
A bodily reaction, yeah.
Laughter.
Laughter, that's the shame and embarrassment. Have you ever, yes.
Relaxation.
Relaxation happens after any kind of catharsis. After you've had a really good laugh, you feel really relaxed, or a good cry, right? You have a good cry, you feel much better, relaxed. What about cold sweat from fear and shaking and shivering? Shaking, shivering, and cold sweat. That is your body discharging the fear energy that way. I had a threat on my life once before I had to go out and face a very large crowd during the Vietnam protests. And I was going to speak extempore, but I was upset by this threat against me and my family. And so I said to myself, in order to prepare, I said, well, I'm afraid. And at that time, when I was only 40, a mere child, at that time, I had never said that in 25 years, because men are taught not to be afraid. They think fear is cowardice. It has nothing to do with it, but that's what men are taught. So I said, I'm afraid, and I kept saying it, and I began to shake. And the shaking was so violent that I had to lay on the floor, and so I didn't fall. And I bathed my clothes with sweat. I had a fear catharsis, and it took 15 minutes. I got up, took a shower, and made an extempore speech that moved people to tears. Best speech I ever made. That's what I call relaxation. So if you've had shaking and sweating, that's your body doing its thing, returning to health from the fear stimulus and energy. Anybody have an experience like that? Shaking and sweating. How many are familiar with that? Okay, it's a good thing to do on the freeway, where your life is in danger for every second that you're on the freeway, even if it's not your fault. I mean, dead is dead, right? Okay, one final thought, which you raised. What about anger? Now, this is the hardest question of all in modern societies. What is the catharsis of anger? How much more time?
As much as you want.
What is the catharsis of anger? This is a hard one. Yes.
Shakiness. You're starting to shake.
Shake, that's the fear. That's fear. And often they occur together. Anger and fear go together. Huh?
Tense muscles.
Tense muscles, that's the emotion itself. You're caught in the emotion and you feel very tense when you're afraid or angry or so on. What is the catharsis of anger? Heavy breathing? That's the energy of a primitive emotion. I'm telling you, this is very hard, so just off the top of your head, guess at what might be anger, the sign of anger catharsis.
The temperature goes from this to
Yes. When I get angry like that, I think, my God, it's hot in this room. It's not the room that's hot, it's me. It's the metabolizing of the adrenaline so that you don't have to run 4 miles to run off the adrenaline. It metabolizes it instantly. Your body temperature goes up. It's not screaming, shouting, or hitting. It has nothing to do with the anger of your body. It doesn't help. So you people that are arguing with your spouses or partners and screaming and yelling and calling dirty names and so on, forget it. What you want is the heat of anger. But the way to argue in anger is to tell them in ordinary language that you're angry and what you're angry about. I am angry because. And if you say it several times, a little differently each time, because the person that you're telling it to will get mad if you repeat it exactly the same way. I am angry because. And sometimes you feel the body heat when you say it. You don't have to shout. In the anger, the body heat usually goes unnoticed. I'm in an airplane with a man who has a very sharp tongue, a colleague from another department. And I had a very happy experience the day before, and I'm trying to tell him about it. And he interrupts me after a few sentences, and he says, and he starts giving me a psychological analysis of this happy event that I'm telling him about. And I let him speak a couple sentences, and then I interrupt him in return, and I say, Dr. So-and-so, and this is an ordinary voice, I'm not yelling or screaming or anything. I said, Dr. So-and-so, you interrupted my story, and you're trying to put it into your terms instead of listening to mine. And he apologized to me the whole rest of the flight. I did it just right, and I noticed that as I was talking, it got very hot in the airplane. I had an attack of body heat, and I felt wonderful. Unlike the thousands and thousands of times I've yelled at my poor wife, or she's yelled at me, which doesn't work, but we keep doing it. I must say that it's a pleasure to come to Europe. This is another emotion of mine I'll tell you about. It's a pleasure to come to Europe after our last election, where we'll have a new president. Because I realized that coming to Europe in the last 8 years, I felt ashamed of my country. And now I no longer feel ashamed, because we're going to try to be different. And I apologize for the behavior of my country in the last 8 years. Any questions or comments?
I just want to ask if it is better to show when you are angry or just hide on your anger.
I understand. Very good question. It's better to show it. It's better to show the emotion at the time. But in the case of anger, it's very important how you show it. And what I recommend is to show it verbally. You explain your anger rather than act it out. You don't have to raise your voice. I am angry at you because, and then you give the reasons, and then they won't notice because you're not yelling, and then you say it again. And you have to be very polite, but relentless. You keep saying it over and over again until they penetrate that you're angry and why you're angry. You keep saying it in different ways until it penetrates. They don't want to get it. You want them to get it, so you're relentless. You understand the word relentless? You don't give up. Keep saying it until they get it.
Is it always wise to, the emotion is sometimes, you know, it comes spontaneous or always comes spontaneous, but is it wise to always to show the emotion, because sometimes you get fooled? Do you know what I mean?
It's best to express the emotion, but it matters a great deal how you express it. And anger is particularly important, that you not yell and scream. They will get the idea that you're angry, but at the same time they blank out because you're shaming them. You see, you don't want to shame the other person, because that's a disaster. They're not going to get it in the long run. So if you talk in ordinary language at a normal tone of voice, it's more likely that you will have the anger discharged through heat. If you're yelling and screaming, you probably won't do it. You won't have the heat.
Isn't it wise to first identify your feeling? Because if you are very much ashamed in different situations,
yes,
you can react with anger and then shame the other person.
That's right.
You have to maybe think before.
Well, ideally it's best to identify the emotions that you're feeling, but we seldom are able to do that. So what we have to do is, if you're upset about something or you feel strongly, is you start talking. And they say, well, what are you talking about? And you say, well, just let me talk. Hear me out. I need to talk. And as you talk, maybe you'll be able to identify the emotion, maybe not. The talking itself can help a path towards catharsis. But you need to have a listener. If you're competing for the floor with another person, it doesn't work with the emotions. No matter how brilliant the words, it doesn't get at your bodily needs. See, our bodies have needs, and they're not just like hunger and sex. It's also we have emotional needs. We need to cry. Men in our society need to learn how to cry. Maybe we'd have less wars if that happened. We have to teach our children. You know that song? You know that song. Teach your children well, their father's hell will slowly go by.
I don't know the song, but it's a good one.
Sing it.
That's from the 60s. Teach your children well, their father's hell will slowly go by. Help me, Suzanne.
I don't know.
Okay, so our society, we're very repressed. Modern societies are very repressed, especially the English-speaking ones, because the Industrial Revolution started in England, and so it's been going on longer. And the English language has got more words by far than any other language, and it's got the poorest emotion vocabulary, lexicon. Isn't that odd? The bigger the language, the smaller the emotion lexicon, and the more confusing. Take the word pride, a very important word. In English, it has a double meaning, so you can't even use it. You can't talk to people about it. That is a proud man. Well, are you praising him or condemning him? The pride that goeth before the fall, it says in the Bible. Pride is not a usable, it's an important idea, but it's not a usable word in the English language. Shame, I don't even want to talk about it. It's completely forbidden in polite society. Anger, in fact, is the only word that you can talk about openly without worrying about how people are interpreting it. But they misinterpret that too, because they think you mean external acting out of anger and aggression, violence and aggression. So the English language is horrible on emotion, and the traditional societies, small traditional societies, are much better. The best language for emotion lexicon is Maori. They have a wonderful language for emotion. All of the things I've told you about are like already known among the Maori culture. They all know it all. They know it all from birth because they speak a language which doesn't hide the emotions. Okay, so I have a radical idea that we can change our society by teaching our children and ourselves and our partners and our families to express their emotions in a helpful, cathartic way. I have an analysis of the causes of the First World War in one of my books, Bloody Revenge. And I argue in that book that what the First World War was about, because historians have yet to figure out, like, why were they fighting? Why didn't they negotiate first? There was no negotiations. After the Archduke was assassinated, there were no negotiations. They fought. Millions of people. And what I argue in my book is that that war was the outcome of unacknowledged shame. The French had been humiliated by their defeat in 1871, and they vowed to get revenge on their honor and to attack Germany. And then the Second World War arose in a somewhat different way, but with the same motivation. The Germans were humiliated by the Treaty of Versailles, and they vowed revenge. And Hitler was the result, because that was his message. He will bring back the honor of the German people. And that's what they heard. So I go on in later work to talk about Vietnam, and especially Iraq. That Iraq is what you were talking about, hiding shame. The 9/11 attack happened on George Bush's watch, hiding shame under aggressive anger. So we've got to do something about these emotions in modern societies, and I'm going to ask you at least to think about that possibility. Thank you very much.
Hello. I have a question. I was sitting thinking here. I watched a TV program on Swedish television the other day, and it was about the Swedish school for the little kids. And this school, I think it was in Stockholm somewhere, they were putting back the shame corner, you know.
Yes.
Yeah, so the children that didn't behave in the corner, but they said it's a nice room and with nice colors, then they could do. But what will be the consequences for those kids?
They're using shame as a punishment, and it's very undesirable. As Pippi Longstocking, you and your team, they do a Pippi Longstocking program, and edutainment. Pippi Longstocking was against that because she knew, in some way she knew, that shame is very, unacknowledged shame is very destructive, both for the child and for the punisher. It's not a healthy way to deal with social control.
I'm thinking of Obama and what sort of emotions has he given to you and to the country?
Perfect question. Obama is the prophet of dignity for all, not just for black people, not just for Latinos, but for working people, anyone who has been humiliated. That's the subtext of all of his speeches, dignity for all, and that's the right direction for our country.
Do you think he will achieve with his promises? Do you think he will keep the promises? Or
I think he will try.
Chances?
I think he will try. The question was, will Obama keep the promises? Well, it's hard to say. He will try to do it. It's a brilliant tack that he takes, dignity for all. It's brilliant. It's exactly what is needed. Because everybody in the course of the day usually has some embarrassment, shame, or humiliation. I have a colleague in Berkeley, Robert Fuller, who has a book on somebodies and nobodies. It's a wonderful book. And he says that during the day, we all sometimes feel like a somebody, but when we're mistreated or rejected, we feel like a nobody. You know what he's talking about? Sometimes you feel invisible, right? But sometimes you feel, oh yeah, I'm here. Somebodies and nobodies. And I think, and Fuller's, the name of one of his books is The Politics of Dignity. And Obama stole it from him. I don't know that he ever read it. He came upon the same idea independently. Yes?
Yes, I'm wondering if you think it's possible to have that amount of power and keep your ideals?
Oh, that's a hard question. You know, I think I could go on for quite at length about that question. I think it's possible. A lot depends on the context, on the people immediately around him and who we know nothing about, and on the inner strength, which is like self-esteem, which is knowing how to acknowledge shame. Self-esteem is another code word. It means high dignity, justified pride, low unacknowledged shame. Self-esteem is a code word. There are thousands of them. Suzanne has a whole scale, a coding list for hundreds and hundreds of words in English which mean shame or embarrassment. It was an awkward moment for me. The moment, not me, the moment is awkward. Projecting outside onto the moment and using a word other than an emotion word, it was awkward. That's a physical metaphor. It means I was embarrassed. Well, why don't we say I'm embarrassed? It's forbidden. So self-esteem is being able to manage one's shame in a way that in a healthy way, which is to laugh. Have we seen Obama laughing? Anyone? Yeah? Well, if you're president especially, you have to do a lot of laughing because you take a lot of shit. Not just the workers, but the one on the top. So you have to laugh a lot. I hope he laughs a lot. Obama has what looks to me like a very good combination of intellect and feeling, which we haven't seen in our country for a long time. Like Kerry and Gore, they had a wonderful program. Big intellects, emotionally flat. Yeah.
I think the special thing with Obama is that he actually worked with the poor people. He was working like social worker a few years in his town in Chicago. So I think he's seen, you know, the lowest level in the society. He's seen the people are suffering. You know, he's been there.
Yeah.
If you look at the Bush family, they're really rich and they've been.
Yes, that helps to see that kind of suffering. It's open suffering, but we all suffer also from these emotions, you know, if we don't manage to deal with them adequately. That's why it's a good idea to have a partner or an attachment, someone you can talk to, especially when you're upset and you can't figure out why. You just have to talk until it comes out, or else you'll suffer. You're suffering. Talking is a pathway out of suffering and into feeling. So we all need to have at least one confidant, wonderful French word, a confidant who has a good ear and will give us our turn when we ask for it. Other questions or comments? Thank you for your time and attention.